So welcome everyone. My name is Stefanie. Today we'll be talking about how we create trust with AI. This is part of a 3-part series with the Design Lab. So my previous presentation was about data and the importance of data to design. So we're starting now, and let me see if I can. Sorry, I'm also figuring this new platform out, so just bear with me as I navigate this myself. Okay, and I think I am manipulating it in a different way this time. Okay, so these are the rules and regulations of the Design Lab. I'm just following their template. You guys always been really great, so just you know what to do. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about AI design and how do we create trust for AI, which is really key and important. And we're going to be talking a lot about trustworthiness, right? AI and trustworthiness is very important, and those kind of terms need to come together in order for us to really have ethical AI. So again, presenting the agenda, I'll give you a little bit of information about me. If you haven't ever met me before, you haven't attended a presentation before. We'll talk a little bit about the model, the AI model life management, the pillars of trustworthiness. Why are they going to be important? Because right now we have a lot of government regulations. And we are also have to talk about one of those pillars: explainability, fairness, drift, or robustness. And we're going to talk about privacy and transparency. And of course, I'll provide some resources, and then we go into Q&A. Cool. All right. So let's get right to it. So a little bit about me. So currently, I am Stefanie, like I said, Stefanie Lauria is my name. Currently, I am the lead designer and strategist for AI on IBM Z. So I lead a group of designers and design strategy for our clients, helping them on their adoption of AI capabilities on IBM's mainframe. So we design enterprise AI solutions that power most of the world's transactions. And before that, I've also worked in startups, healthcare, and telecom and nonprofit. I've been doing design for about 15 years now. My discipline concentration is UX design, but I also do a lot of research, and I've dabbled in visual and content. So I am, I've been around the block, so to speak. I've also included my LinkedIn and my Medium in case you guys are interested in knowing and learning more about. I'm going to try to see if I can, I'll try to share these links with you guys probably towards the end of the presentation. I'll put them on the chat. Okay, so what about model life management, right? What does that mean? So when we're talking about model life management, we're talking about the very inception of the idea of why we need an AI model, right? So I've talked at length about this in my first presentation about the problem definition. So understanding the problem and understanding what AI will solve for. Once we decided that that's, we're going to create an AI, a lot of the times there is, different types of AI out there. This is mostly a lot related to ML, but you can also apply this to large language models and Gen AI. So you have to source the data and prepare the data. So if you're talking for machine learning, you're talking about thousands, millions really of data points, and we want to make sure that you're using the right data and the preparation. Again, all of that we talked more about in the last presentation a month ago. And once you have the data completely cleaned and is ready to go, you're going to use it to train the model. So you have to train the model on data, right? And then once the model is trained and you're like, okay, it's doing what we want it to do, we're going to put it into deployment, meaning it's going to go out into the wild. and it's going to do what it's meant to do, right? Maybe it's going to, you know, be the model that is going to rate if, you know, your credit card transaction is fraudulent. Maybe it's a model to say, okay, you are approved for a loan or not. So, you know, so that is off in the wild, and it's kind of rating every application or transaction that's coming in. It's the model is going to say yes or no, right? And then we have monitoring of the models, so especially about trust. And that's going to be a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So there are pillars of trust. When we're talking about trust, we're talking about different pillars. And different organizations may define this differently. I am giving you the definition that we are using here at IBM, right? So the 5 pillars of trust that we're going to talk about with AI is going to be explainability, fairness, robustness, privacy, and transparency. And we're going to go more in depth about each one of them. However, before we go there, why are these 5 pillars so important? Why do you need to have, you know, create explainability, fairness, robustness, privacy, and transparency with your eyes? Because for nothing else, right? We can talk about the ethics of AI, but for nothing else, we're already having a lot of government regulations coming into the books. So organizations are going to be have to be very responsible for what exactly is AI doing, what decisions are AI making, and how and why. So in the US, we have the executive order of 2023, and really talked about all of the safe, secure, you know, what does that mean for trustworthy development of AI. And then they also, White House put out a blueprint for like an AI Bill of Rights, right? And then on the other side of the pond, we have the EU, and they also been very aggressive about putting, you know, privacy rules and regulations. So one of the regulations already in existence is the DORA, or Digital Operational Resilience Act, which talks about how you manage data and privacy of that data. And then, of course, there's the EU Act that is going to be fully in effect by 2025. So if your organization are using AI, you are going to be needing to really explain a lot of the decision that the AI is making. So the first pillar that we talked about is explainability, right? So like, what is explainability exactly? So it is meant to describe what the AI model is doing, so that we can accurately see if it's biased or if there is other impacts that the model is doing that, you know, during the training it wasn't intended to do. It looks at, you know, the model accuracy. If it's, again, we talked about already, you know, the fairness of it, you know, gives transparency to everyone involved, all the personas, all the people involved in the process from creation to use, how the outcomes, how are those outcomes derived? How decisions being made? And it's critical because we talked about this already. You have to build trust, right? And confidence that what the AI model is doing is correct. So what we talk about is, with explainability, is prediction accuracy, traceability. How do you trace the decisions, and ensuring that those are the right rules and features based on the data? And really, this understanding and monitoring those decisions are going to be really important. Again, especially because if you are using AI to make really important decisions like loan approval, or even, you know, even if it's, you might think it's inconsequential, maybe fraud, you might still want to, you know, really understand how why was a transaction, you know, flagged as fraud, right? So there is a lot to that. Now, I want to also bring a distinction. There is a distinction between AI insights and predictions versus explainability. And you're going to hear that a lot, right? So when you're looking at a model will make a prediction represented usually by natural language, right? It's going to give you a probability of something, that something's going to happen, something's going to occur. So, again, the chance of default, somebody's going to default on a loan is 86%. So a chance that this is a fraudulent transaction is 90%, right? Or 50%. Now, explainability is giving additional context. Sometimes could be natural language, or a lot of it, if you're designing for a data scientist, you're going to include a lot of data visualization to explain how the model arrived at that probability. So you can see here on this, what are the features, or what is the features of the model, the data, what is the data, how is the data weighing in on the model to make a decision. So, and this is a very common algorithm used by data scientists to make the determination called SHAP. And so they use that to be able to get that interpretation and say, okay, this model is really working, it's giving the explanations we need based on that decision. Now, we also need to consider about who is the personas that you need to think about. So we just talked about the data scientist, right? Data scientist is going to be the person in the front line, and depending on type of AI you're building, right? So sometimes you're embedding AI into an application. So the data scientist is sort of like behind the scenes a little bit, right? So it's kind of behind a curtain. And he's looking at your application and seeing, okay, if my application, and you work for a bank, and the bank is using an application that is leveraging AI, again, if we use a use case of like, we're going to approve or not approve somebody for a loan, the data scientist is always that person behind the scenes going to be like looking at the model and seeing, is the model doing that right thing, right? Now, with that, based on what we talked about, regulations and government laws are coming down the pipeline, compliance officers are going to be a really key persona, and how you design for them also you need to take into account, right? So data scientists are very focused on visualizations and looking at data, looking at charts. Now, compliance officer might not be so interested. So I would say, we're currently right now doing a lot of research to understand a little bit more about this persona and what their needs would be. But that's somebody that you need to consider, as they are responsible for, communicating with regulators and letting them know that the AI that they're using in the organization is fair and unbiased. Then you have a business analyst. A business analyst is interested in the explainability of AI because they want to make sure that is, again, it's representing the organization in a way that is trusted, right? One, if we go back to the example of the loan approval, obviously the business analyst is interested in ensuring that that bank is going to make the most money with this application, right? So that the loans are being approved are actually going to be paid back. That's what they're interested in. However, I would also add that is not only their interest, because these clients needs the end user, right? And this person that we're calling the end user needs to trust your organization in order to even go in for a loan. Now, and for explainability, also a customer service representative is going to be really important, because if the person gets denied for the loan, if that's, the example we're using, they're going to call, the bank's 1-800 number, and they're going to, the first line of the person in that first line with the end user is going to be the customer service representative. And they are going to need to explain to that end user very simply why the loan was denied. So there is a lot of factors in consideration how you present explainability, and also thinking about when you explain explainability, right? Depending on the type of application or AI that you're working on, if it's really a direct to consumer application, having explainability that's very easy to understand in natural language at the moment when AI is making a decision is most favorable, right? And I think that's a lot of, part of why, part of the slide is, when do we show explainability? So, for those three personas, the data scientist, compliance officer, business analyst, they are probably, they're more in the back end of the business. So they're probably looking for, post-output analysis. They want to dig deeper into the data. So they probably want to spend time, right? They want to look in there and see, okay, what about this model that is saying, okay, this is really fraud? Is it just income? Is it something else? How do we come to a decision? And then for customer service and the end user, we, like I just said before, is really the moment of that interaction. And we want it to be in natural language, right? Very easy to understand to why the decision was made. The next pillar is fairness. So fairness essentially talks about when a model output or prediction unfavorably underweights or overweights a sensitive feature of that data. So a lot of the sensitive data is gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, disability. And here I also put proxy features, because although you might sanitize your data and remove all of these characteristics from your data, there could be subsequent pieces of information about a user or set of users that could indicate and therefore indicate, for instance, their race or their gender, and therefore make your model biased. And I'll give you a perfect example of what happened. So this is a very famous example. So Northpoint is a software that was developed to basically determine if a defendant going in front of a court, how should a judge how should a judge punish them? Should they give them time in jail? Should they get probation? And they were using this really the software, and it was giving a recidivism prediction. However, the recidivism prediction favored whites over black offenders twice the rate, right? So basically it was saying, well, in other words, saying that white defendants were a lot less likely to reoffend. However, when ProPublica, which is the organization that looked further into this of the algorithm and this AI, they proved that it was really unreliable, that only 20% of the people predicted to commit those crimes would actually went ahead to do it. So essentially it was creating this very big bias about how people of color are more likely to recommit crimes, so therefore they should be, have a harsher punishment. However, that proved out not to be the fact. So here, this example coming from the article, this black woman that's here, she committed a very low offense and never again recommitted. The white defendant or offender here also committed a low crime, but then had a history of crimes and went to commit further crimes, right? So you can see it was rated as low risk, and the woman was rated high risk, but the outcomes were the opposite. So again, it's very critical, right? When we're thinking about the model, again, the data is important, which we talked about in the last presentation. So data is the foundation of every AI model. So it's very important to take that into account. Now, when we are thinking about fairness, who are the personas who are going to be most affected by this or most interested? Obviously, a data scientist are always going to be involved in this process, right? Data scientist, again, is the person that's looking into the model and saying, is it unfair? Is it fair? Based on the characteristics of the data and how the model is weighing that data favorably over certain attributes versus others. Compliance officers, we already talked about, right? If a regulator comes in and asks why is your loan application favoring white applicants versus black applicants, they either have to correct or they have to really explain why that is not a biased decision. Business analysts, of course, because that impacts, right, the profitability and the revenue of a company. And most importantly is the end user, right? The person who is maybe inputting that application or, being impacted by the decision, like in the last case of North Point, right? The people is sitting in front of a judge are the people who are most impacted by that decision. So we really need to consider the output of those models. And then we have drift or robustness. So drift is when a model essentially degrades or the performance of it decreases because the input of the new data that's coming in, right? It's the model it's rating the transaction, so it's intaking that new data. There is a discrepancy with that and the training data. So it changes over time, and based on what the model was trained, it no longer is giving the predictions it was intended to do, right? So if the intent of the model was to say we want to approve, we want a confidence of at least 70% for approvals of loans, and we're seeing that all of a sudden, based on the plot, we are no longer seeing that, and then we're seeing again that is the model is outweighing something versus another. We want to make sure that we are knowing that this has happened, right? So drift, I would say, unlike explainability is something that the user will search for. It's something that the user will search to do, right? They need to find. However, drift is not easy, not something that the personas will search to do. What they are wanting to do is be alerted that something is happening. So they have to manage drift. And again, these for drift would be the three most important personas, right? You have your data scientist, your compliance officer, and your business analyst. They want to make sure that the AI that they put out in the wild is behaving the way they intended to behave. So managing drift, you have to monitor it. So again, is that alert, right? Getting alerted that, okay, this model isn't behaving the way it is supposed to be behaving. Then what happens is you have to get to the root cause of why is it misbehaving? Like what happened, right? Why is it causing it? What's about the data that is making it drift? And then once you learn that, then the data scientist will work to retrain the model so that degradation stops, right? So it's really important to consider these aspects. So when you are designing for this experience, you're considering how are these personas getting alerted, how are they analyzing the information, and then giving the information necessary so that the data scientist can retrain that model. And then I've put together privacy and transparency together. And so privacy is really, really securing the data and the AI. So if a malicious actor accesses an AI model, they can also view the training data. And if this training data has sensitive information from the data sample, they can use that for malicious, intent. So really it's important that there is a data risk assessment being conducted before a model goes into deployment. If we go back into that model management, right? You can create and you can train the model, but you also want to make sure before it goes into deployment that this is going to be secured. Because obviously we don't want anybody's information to be stolen at any given time. And then we have transparency. So transparency is really asking the questions about who is training the model, how is the data being sourced, how is the data being used to make those decisions, what are the most important features of the model. So are we going to weigh income? Are we going to weigh debt to income ratio as most important for a loan approval application? And what is the business purpose and use case that's being used, right? And And so it's like, transparency is almost like when I think of transparency is like when you think about your labels on your, every food package has a label, right? It tells you everything about what's in that package, right? The content of sugar and carbohydrates essentially that will be transparency, right? Talking about all the things that are going into the decisions or the AI model, so that it's evident that, there is no malicious intent of what the model is trying to do. And then for the personas needed for these two particularly, obviously, again, data scientist, compliance officer, business analyst, most likely want to know some form of all of it or some of it. But obviously the end user, right? The end user wants to have the transparency about the model, so they feel comfortable that, when they're putting the information into a loan approval application, it's being assessed fairly. And they want to also make sure that their data isn't going to be used maliciously by foreign actors, right? So all of this is going to be really important about building trust for your AI models. And for your SAI models, but really your experience, right? So I've added some additional resources, and I'll share this with you guys in a minute. But I talked to you in the beginning about, how some organizations, deal with the pillars of trust a little differently. So I've included here something by Deloitte. They go a lot more in depth about how they define, trustworthy AI. There is, I've included different components of the pillars about fairness, explainability, what is drift, and how do you build transparency with AI models. And one thing I would also add, that, a lot of the conversations today is we're talking about Gen AI, right? Like ChatGPTs, and a lot of those models are hallucinating. Essentially, they're filling in the gaps of the knowledge that they have and creating information that's not real factually correct. And so right now, there is a lot of work, I can say, at least from the IBM research side, about thinking, how do we bring explainability to these types of models? Because in all honesty, as far as I know, there is no tools out there to be able to really monitor those types of models. The monitoring tools that exist today are really meant for, for more traditional AI, machine learning, and those types of models. And so again, added here a lot of content for you guys to review. I will also link the ProPublica article so you can learn a little bit more about that case. And then last time I also mentioned John Maeda. John Maeda is this fantastic designer who's been around for many decades, and he's now the design VP at Microsoft for AI. So he has a lot of opinions on this topic and a lot of conversations about AI in the future of what is it going to become. So I definitely recommend following him on YouTube. He has really good content. He gives a lot of talks. So definitely consider following him. And with that, I know I just spoke a lot, so I will open up for questions and see if anybody has anything that they want to ask or comment about anything that was said here today. Any questions? And I think you might be able to come off mute. I'm not 100% sure. This is my first time using this, but if you want to put a question in the chat, please do so. Anything that was maybe unclear that you want to learn more about? And let me see if I can also, let me see if I can take those, let me see if I can open up the presentation in a different format so I can give you guys the links that I have here. Okay. Give me a second. Okay. All right. Let me just share the links. And if you guys are interested in learning more about me, if you want to connect to LinkedIn, if you have questions after this, you're more than welcome to reach out and connect and ask any questions you might have. And here is my Medium. I want to see if I can maybe give you guys, let me give you the ProPublica article. And you can always get that as well. And I think, let me see if I can, let me see if I can give you guys the other. So these are all the links to the different resources as well. Oh, I guess they're not saying I can't, too many characters. Okay. I will hopefully also share this with the community. So hopefully you guys would have access to the resources slide. That way you have, oh, we have one question. Sorry about that. Hi, Louise. One of the main problems I see with hallucination is that many times the questions they made to the AI are ambiguous. How can this be addressed by making the AI complement the idea by asking the user or how? That is a very good point, right? Because a lot of it is how you ask the question. But I would counter that a lot of it has to do with how the tuning is done on those Gen AI models, right? There's prompt tuning. So I think when we are tuning for those models, we also should be tuning for ambiguity and those variations in how a person might ask the question. And I also think there is ways that needs to also already, that have not yet been done, that we need to think about. Okay, so I've asked a question to ChatGPT and I get a response. Well, how do I know the response is correct? Is there a confidence that the response is correct? Well, where is the sources of this response? Where is this information coming from? So I think there is ways for us to get there where even if it's hallucinating, we're like, okay, well, I got this information from here and here. And I'm like, well, but I can kind of verify that isn't 100% correct. And maybe there's a confidence score, right? Maybe the model can say, well, I am 100% correct that this is the right answer, or I can say, well, it's 50% correct. So I think there's ways to address this, but I don't think it has just yet been done. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Any other questions anybody have? Okay. If there are no other questions, we can end it here. I was going to try to see if I can put more of these resources on the chat before we drop. So if you guys are interested in learning more about any of this, Oh, and then a suggestion about how to learn about its intersection with UX and UI. So that's a good question. So I would say there's a couple of different things. I think the Design Lab is doing a pretty good job in bringing people like myself to the conversation. One of the things that I also will be doing is I am also doing a repeat of a talk that I did a few months ago about the UX and UI of AI. How is it different from deterministic experiences? So if you're interested in that, I would suggest to be on the lookout for that. I think that's going to be I want to say either June or July, beginning of July. That's my 2 cents. And if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me on, on LinkedIn. I would love to continue the conversation. If you have, more information, more questions about, the UX. Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate you being here today. Hopefully this was really helpful. And it really gives you insight of learning a little bit more about AI and the context of trustworthiness. Hoping that we'll start to, think about as you're working on AI experiences, not just, okay, here's the AI, but okay, what's happening behind the curtain, right? And making sure that we're giving our users those explanations. So, all right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great one, everyone. Bye.